So now, having heard the presentations from two of the industry leaders with regard to CGI, I'd like to share with you the SinterCast perspective. And of course, you'll see a lot of common ground in the three presentations. And I'm very flattered as well that Tupi has adopted the five-wave scenario. I think it's a very clear way to show the development of the market. And let's begin by reviewing the positive growth that was achieved during 2006. Our revenue from series production was up by 45% compared to 2005. The delivery of our consumable sampling cups were up by 70%. And you can see this very positive growth trend that we've had over the last few years in the sampling cup deliveries. The reason that the series production revenue and the sampling cups have increased is, of course, because the series production activities have increased. We started 2006 at a rate of approximately 300,000 engine equivalents, and we finished the year at around 400,000 equivalents. So this is an increase of about 33%. And it raises the question, how can we have an increase of revenue of 45% when the production itself only increased by 33%? And there's two reasons for that. The first reason is that the production during 2006 was very stable. We started at a high level. And in comparison, our production ramped up very much more during 2005. We started 2005 at only 100,000. So we had much more contribution from the early months of 2006. The second reason is that we managed to negotiate price increases with most of our customers during 2006. And in fact, we achieved price increases representing approximately 85% of our production volume. And I think that that speaks very loudly as to the value recognition that our customers place on our technology. We have, by year end, around 400,000 engine equivalents in production. Our new order intake during 2006 was also around 400,000 engine equivalents. So that the new order intake in 2006 fully doubles the amount of volume production that we had in all the previous years combined. And I think that this really echoes the trends that Tarquinio and Roger talk about with this ramping up of the CGI production. So in addition to what's in production by year end and the new orders received in 2006, we've also talked about the engines that are in our development pipeline. And these are engines which we have a high confidence in, and Roger talking about 4 programs being confirmed already. So we have a high confidence in them, but we haven't yet publicly announced them. And the combination of these 4 million in the pipe, plus 400,000 last year, and 400,000 already in production, this gives us the total current market that we see of around 5 million engine equivalents. And what we'll be doing over the next years is moving the programs from the development pipe into the announced order category and moving them from announced orders into series production. And of course, as we do that, we'll have new programs coming into the pipe. And I think certainly very good to have had Tupi and Mag with us today, because they're able to share with you these programs that will be entering the pipe. So it's not that the pipe gets longer and the development takes longer. In fact, the development becomes shorter as people get more experience. It's just that the pipe gets bigger, the diameter is getting bigger, the volume is getting bigger. And finally, we achieved a positive cash flow result in the fourth quarter of 2006. Very important for the company in terms of business performance, but also important to the company in that we came back and honored a commitment that we had made to the shareholders in 2003 to achieve positive cash flow by the end of 2006. And with this as a foundation, we look at the revenue and the production activities. We can see how these come together in our business case. So we have 2 main sources of revenues from new installations, System 2000 sales, and also from the running production. For the System 2000 installations, we can either provide those as a sale, in which case we get a one-time cash injection, and that's something around 3 to 4 million Swedish crowns per installation. Or we can do it as a lease, where the revenue is spread out typically over a 7 or 8 year period. We also have the running revenue from the series production, which is a combination of the revenue from the consumable sampling cup and the technology fee or the production fee. And this is around 50 euro per ton. And today we're operating with a direct operating expense of something just less than 25 million Swedish crowns. So with this information, we can make a very simple plot where we see the number of engine equivalents to the break-even. And the first thing that we see from this is that with no System 2000 sales, we have a break-even volume of approximately 1 million engine equivalents. And this makes perfect sense. If we're on 50 euros per ton, and there's 20 engine equivalents per ton, that gives us about 2.50 euros for each engine equivalent. And at an exchange rate of 10 to 1, that's about 25 Swedish crowns. So of course, to make 25 million crown revenue, we need about 1 million engine equivalents. The most powerful thing that we can do in this diagram, particularly in the early years, is to have new system installations. And last month, we announced the new installation at the Volvo foundry here in Sweden, and that moves us stepwise over and reduces our break-even volume by around 150,000 engine equivalents. So today, as you saw in the first quarter report, which was issued last week, we're currently running at around 425,000, and this will be the focus for the rest of the year for SinterCast. We'll try to increase the production volume so that we move upward on the slope, and at the same time secure new installations so that we can stepwise move toward the right as you view it. And to balance that out. And our target for 2007 is to complete the year with a full year neutral cash flow result. So what I'd like to do for the rest of the presentation is to look at the current market status and the development opportunity also in terms of the 5 waves. And I'll go into a little bit more detail than what Tarkanian did. But we begin with the first wave. It's the V diesels in Europe. As both Tarkanian and Roger have said, this is a very successful wave for us. We're currently running something like 25,000 engine blocks per month. And these engine blocks are available in 16 different vehicles and 8 car brands. I think that the most powerful statistic about the first wave is that each of the last 7 V diesel engines that were announced by OEMs have been announced with a CGI cylinder block. So the scorecard, when we talk about aluminum and gray cast iron, the scorecard CGI 7, aluminum 0, gray iron 0, and we expect this very positive trend to continue. The second wave in the commercial vehicle sector is for both cylinder blocks and heads, and we expect 2007 to be a real transition year. It's precisely what Roger has said about coming into this transition period. At Tupi, we'll have the start of production in July of this year of the MAN 10.5 and 12.4 liter cylinder blocks. We also have the start of production of 2 engines with both block and head for Ford of Turkey, Ford Otosan. So those will give us some early revenues in the commercial vehicle sector. We also have the new installation again at the Volvo foundry here in Sweden, and with the first production reference starting during this year. And what we see in the commercial vehicle sector is that size will become the driver. Generally, people in the industry agree that it's not necessary to have more than around 500 or 550 horsepower. So this power race will start to subside, and what the OEMs will try to do is to get that power from smaller engine packages. So maybe today they're getting 550 horsepower from an 18-liter engine, but in the future from a 16-liter engine, and potentially even from 14 liters. And even for a 9 or a 12-liter engine, of course, they'll try to get as much performance as they can from that engine package. And the drive to get more from less requires stronger materials. And the requirement for stronger materials is always the opportunity for CGI. So we see a real growth opportunity in the commercial vehicle sector. We've had some early production references here, the 50,000 cylinder liners for Caterpillar, which are outrunning successfully on the roads in North America. The initial fleet program that we did with Ford Otosan last year to get test engines out on the road. But both of those programs have been fulfilled. And at present, we don't have any production in the commercial vehicle wave. And so when we talk about a transition year, what we see is that the new programs that we'll announce this year, plus the programs that start production during the year, will combine to give a total volume of about 1 million engine equivalents. So that's 2007 in the commercial vehicle sector, 0 to 1 million. And of course, we won't have 1 million engine equivalents running by the end of the year. This is when they ramp up to full volume. But all of these are announced and come on stream sometime during the year. In the third wave, this is inline diesels in Europe, and it's interesting to see that Tupi has switched them and put the V diesels outside of Europe as wave number 3 and shifted the inlines to wave number 4. And chronologically, I think that's the right thing to do. Initially, we had put the third wave, or rather inline diesels as the third wave. It's developed more slowly than we had originally expected. And I'd like to take a few minutes to explain why the development has been slower than we initially hoped. The main reason is this balance of the need versus the cost. And as both Tarquinio and Roger have said, cost predominates in the industry. This is clearly the number one priority, especially in this sector, which the inline engines go into smaller vehicles which are more cost sensitive. But also we have to address the need. And we've said previously that inline engines have a rather simple load path. The piston is just traveling straight up and down, and that's relatively simple. Whereas in a V engine, we have 2 cylinder banks, and the pistons are traveling out to the left and the right, and they're opposing each other, and they try to pull the engine apart. So there's a much higher mechanical load in V engines, and that's the biggest part of the need factor. But I'd like to go into a little bit more detail, because the inline sector is important for us. And with the aid of these 2 diagrams, or 2 photos in the bottom of the overhead, we see first an inline 4-cylinder engine block. You see it has 4 cylinders, but it has these support beams in the bottom. And when the piston comes back down, these support beams have to take up all of the load of the engine. So in our 4-cylinder engine, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 support beams. So 5 supports for only 4 cylinders, or 4 explosions. And when we look at a V engine, now we have a V6, and because we have 2 cylinder banks with 3 cylinders each, we now have only 1, 2, 3, 4 support beams for 6 cylinders. So you see that the amount of load for each of those beams is much higher in the V engines. And this is again why the V engines come to their limit before the inlines. I'd like to explain one other thing, and this is with the aid of the Toyota V8, which is produced at Tupi and Tarquinio referred to. And this is the concept of bank offset. Right? So we have these 2 cylinder banks, and what designers will do is they don't put the cylinder bores directly opposite each other, because that would be too much of a tug-of-war effect. So what they do is they shift the 2 cylinder banks, and this is what we call offset. And if you have a rather weak material, for example like aluminum, you have to have a bigger offset so you can spread out the load. With CGI, when we have higher strength, we can put the cylinders almost opposite each other and take up that load in the bottom of the engine. And now if we look at the example of the Audi CGI V8 engine and the Mercedes aluminum V8 engine, what I want to focus on is the dimensions. And the first thing that we do in making an engine lighter is to make those support beams in the bottom of the engine thinner. Yeah? If the material is stronger, we don't need as much of it. And the bore pitch, this is the measurement of the distance from the center of one bore to the center of the next bore. And you see that in the aluminum engine, they've actually got 7 additional millimeters of material there to help contain the load, to help make the engine durable. So in a 4-cylinder bank, or in a V8, or even an inline cylinder, we would have 3 of those. So you save 21 millimeters in length. Huh? The added impact of the bank offset is that with the CGI, or rather with the aluminum, they need to offset the cylinder banks by more. And you see that the total difference in the engine length is actually 120 millimeters. So 100 millimeters is coming from this ability to offset the cylinder banks, and only 20 from the wall thickness. And this is, on the good side, it's a reason why V engines need CGI. With regard to inline engines, we only have this benefit to work with. Right? We don't have the bank offset to increase it. And if you think of that added 100 millimeters, that's like taking a fully assembled V8 engine, cutting a 10-centimeter slice out of the middle of it, and putting it on a weigh scale. And that's the added weight save. And we don't have that factor to play with on the inlines. We don't have the added length advantage. And so when we come to the inline sector, we still have to wait for the need to come. Right now, cost is predominating. The only thing that we have to offer at the moment is weight saving, and we can't give enough weight saving to offset the cost. So the way for us to go forward in the inline wave is just to wait for the pressures to increase until we come to the limit of current materials, and then CGI will come just as it has in the truck engines for the inline sector. So we don't give up on the inline sector at all. We just say that for these reasons, it will be further out in time. We'll come back and look at how the inline sector factors in the market. And the fourth wave, as we had originally written them, is for V-diesel engines outside of Europe. We've had a very positive start to that wave in 2006 with the start of production of the Hyundai V6 in Korea that Roger referred to and asked for a commission. Hyundai has said that they'll bring a version of that engine to Europe before the end of this year, and that they will also bring the engine to North America before 2010. And I think this is the real opportunity for the V-diesel wave, is application in the United States. And as you've heard from the other presentations, new diesel engines, new V-diesel engines have already been announced by Cummins, by Ford, and by General Motors. And in the US, people generally forecast that the penetration will increase from around 3% in 2006 up to around 10 or 15% in 2015. And I see that the TUPE number was 16% in 2015, and interestingly, 20% by 2020. Every 2.5% increase in our penetration provides an additional 1 million engine equivalents. And we're not just going to go after this incremental growth from 3% up to 10%, right? Even that existing 3% are V engines, and those are targets for conversion. So a real opportunity for us. And as you've heard in the presentations previously, we're currently involved in development and pre-production programs for V-diesel engines in the US that provide mature volumes of 2 million engine equivalents. So a very good growth opportunity for us there. The fifth wave is for petrol engines, and exactly as TUPE showed, it's a little bit further out in time. We are actively working on development programs. We hope for the first initial reference production in the petrol sector earlier. And you know, the automotive industry is very much a follower industry. So what we have to do is establish a reference both in the petrol wave and in wave 3 for the inline diesels. Once we have a running reference, just as Roger says, something has to be going for a few years before someone else will jump into it. And I think there we have an opportunity to get an early reference in the petrol sector. Rounding out what we call our primary market, which is cylinder block and head market, we also see an opportunity for diesel engine cylinder heads. And this is primarily for larger engines, again, like the Vs that we're going to see in North America in the 4 to 7 liter size class, because here we have large cylinder bore diameters, and the larger bore diameters require a stiffer cylinder head so that it doesn't deform down into the bore and crack. So this is another opportunity for CGI. So with that as our primary market, we also have growth opportunity in what we call our secondary market. Within the automotive sector, for parts other than cylinder blocks and heads, we have active production of clutch plates. It's only a niche production initially for Aston Martin, but there's a development of dual clutch transmissions which is coming to Europe. And this is forecast to be the most popular form of transmission by 2011. And these will be using CGI clutch pressure plates. And so it's a very important growth opportunity outside of the core automotive sector, or outside of the core block and head sector. And as you know, we're also working on heat components, exhaust manifolds, turbocharger housings at the Dashang foundry in China. We have a production readiness visit there next week with 2 of our engineers on site, and we would be hopeful for a start of production in this activity before the end of 2007. And finally, still in the secondary market, but beyond the core automotive sector, our work with the industrial power applications. We have piston rings for Daros here in Sweden, a real growth opportunity for piston rings, both for increased volume and a second installation in the future, and cylinder heads for General Electric locomotive application, Waukesha engine, and also for Rolls-Royce Power Engineering. And combined, we think that this secondary market will continue to provide about, or rather up to 25% of our total production volume. Today, as you saw in the first quarter report, we're running at a rate of approximately 425,000 engine equivalents. And the breakdown on that is something like 375,000 for the primary market, cylinder block application, and about 50,000 in our secondary market. So running something like 12% currently of the revenue coming from outside the core block and head activity. So it's an important sector. Well, what I'd like to do then is to look at the primary market just in a little bit more detail. And these are published figures from the industry, and we can break down the total engine activity from 2006 into the inline sector, V6, V8, and others. So by others we mean inline 3-cylinder or 5-cylinder, even 6-cylinder, and maybe V10 and V12 engines, and finally trucks. And what we see is that there was approximately 65 million engines produced in the world in 2006. And as a coincidence, based on the weight balance for these engines, it also works out to something like 65 million engine equivalents in 2006. And we can apply reasonable assumptions for the diesel-petrol split in the different categories and come up with estimates for the petrol and diesel production in 2006. But of course, the number of engines really isn't our interest. We're a weight-based business, so we like to look at it in terms of engine equivalents and making, again, reasonable assumptions for the weight of the different engines. We can see the number of engine equivalents in the inline sector, V6, V8, and in trucks. And again, using industry forecast data, we can also span that out for 2009 and 2012. And what we've looked at previously in the 5 waves is the importance of the V6 and the trucks, right? And if we look at that as our true core market, we can see that it's both big and growing. And indeed, our near-term primary market will grow from around 10.5 million engines in 2006, which represents 16% of all engine equivalents, to approximately 17.7 million, or 23% of the total market by 2012. And I'd like to take just a moment here to look at this from a business point of view. The first thing we can see is our penetration in the markets. If we look at 2006, there's approximately 2.9 million V engine equivalents. And as I mentioned a moment ago, we had about 375,000 in production. So this is 12% penetration. Well, what does 12% mean? It means a good start, good penetration, good foothold, and a really good opportunity for growth. Likewise, on the truck side, we talk about 2007 being a transition year with something like 1 million engine equivalents being announced or coming on stream. Well, 1 million out of 7.6 million is again 12 or 13%. Good foothold, good opportunity for growth. When we look at it as a business case, and we think about the inlines, they are important and they're something for the future. But the main message is that the Vs and the trucks are big and getting bigger. The market opportunity there for SinterCast is very good. This is where our technology is embraced, our technology is needed, and it's also valued, and people are willing to pay for it. So this is where we have to focus, and this will be the primary target for us over the next 3 to 5 year period. And while we grow in the V and the truck sector, of course we'll also pick up other references either from non-automotive or potentially from waves 3 and 5. So if we began the presentation by looking back at the growth of 2006, I'd like to conclude by having an outlook on our forecast for 2007. We have new production programs coming on stream, the MAN, 10.5 and 12 liter high volume production at Tupi. As I said, the Ford Otosan 7.3 and 9.0 liter engines. That's both cylinder block and head, so it's good engine equivalents in that program, starting up also around summer. Volvo with our initial cylinder block application before the end of the year, and hopefully as well exhaust manifolds and or turbocharger housings by the end of the year at Dashang in China. We also believe very much in new program commitments, and I think that Roger and Tarquinio have given good hints toward those. So I see more production announcements coming during the year, and of course new foundry installations to help us step toward the right on that break-even plot. And finally, where we'll put most of our attention during 2005 is to provide support for the production programs that already have been announced. As an example, this month in May, we'll have 34 man days on site with our customers supporting different programs. So I hope that gives you a feel for the amount of activity within the company. And supporting these programs is the best thing that we can do to get a most efficient development and a most efficient start of production. It's the best thing that we can do for the customers, and it's the best things that we can do for the shareholders. Thank you.